Good evening, everybody. My name is Coach Gustus, and I'm here with Dr. Falth Brown and Pastor Eric Knox. Welcome to the Male by Birth, Man by Choice. We're so excited tonight because we have some special guests with us, and we have an interesting topic. The topic for tonight is when what you believe and what you feel about, what do you feel about being unequally yoked? Having a relationship with someone and you're unequally yoked. Now that's an interesting topic because we felt that, I don't know if a lot of people out there know what that topic means. However, tonight we're gonna be talking about it and we're gonna get some definitions on it. We're going to get some opinions. We're going to get some points from a spiritual angle, from a scientific and psychological angle, and from a culture angle. So let me just we got two panels that's on with us, and that's Brother Omar over there. He got down there Kevin Logan, but that's Brother Omar. And Sister Chalet. How you doing, Chalet Jean-Baptiste? All right, so I want to get started right away because this topic is pretty much a hot topic. And I'm going to start it off with, of course, our resident pastor and our spiritual leader here, I call spiritual pathfinder, Pastor Eric Knox. Pastor, what does being unequally yoked mean in the spiritual world, and what would it mean if you're not in the spiritual world or you're not in the religious world?
Yeah. Thanks, Coach. Well, actually, biblically in 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 14, it says, do not be yoked together with an unbeliever, or do not be unequally yoked. And actually that comes from a Greco-Roman Greek word that talks about when you put two yokes together and then a board would connect them. And both ox were supposed to carry mutually the load of whatever kind of farming they were doing. And so when Paul talks about not being unequally yoked with a non-believer, what he's saying is that if you're going to get into a relationship with somebody, you want to make sure that you yoke with them, right? Like you're on the same page with them, that like spiritually you guys are on point. You understand that your faith values line up, and you've got common interests, common goals, common dreams, and you have a mutual commitment to one another. In fact, putting the other's interests ahead of your own. So to be unequally yoked is to convey this ideal that, one person wants one thing out of life, and that could be spiritually, monetarily, physically, etc., and the other person wants the exact opposite. So for the Christian tradition, when two people come together and they talk about yokeness, it's really talking about oneness, about two people coming together and they're completely selfless, and they're putting the interests of the other ahead of their own. So that's what it means to be yoked with someone else, especially when you get into a covenant relationship. So when you're going to jump a broom, make sure that you guys are on point spiritually, and that your faith values line up, because that's, at the end of the day, is what's really going to get you guys through some of the most difficult, tough terrains that many couples experience in a relationship. So,
it's interesting that the Google definition of unevenly yoked, and what they did is they said after the year 2000, the definition is when two people have different values and different beliefs, values and belief. Yeah. And they said that that's important. They say regardless of what religious affiliation or anything, if you have different values and different beliefs, then basically they don't think it's such a great idea to be trying to get married with each other. Dr. Faith, I know you heard that terminology before. I just want to unpackage that terminology so we can have a clear understanding all around in terms of what we believe it is. So what are your thoughts on that?
Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Thanks, Coach. Listen, I think Pastor Knox was very clear about what that is, and your definition actually was very clear. It's hard to get an apple and orange to mate, you know, to have something in common. The one thing they have in common is that they are both
Dr. Faith? All right, I think something's going on with your system, Dr. Faith. So we're going to move on with that. So she's talking about an apple and an orange. All right, so I know she was about to say the one thing they have in common is a fruit, that they both fruits and we can eat them. I would think that's where she was going in that. And that's an interesting point there. And is it enough for them to be both fruits and still establish a relationship? You know?
Hey, you know, Doc, man, it's interesting. I was reading the USA Today, and they was doing an interview to make it real simple. It was an interview on John Wall when he came to University of Kentucky to play, and he was recruited by John Calipari. And he said he came there under one condition, and that condition was that he did not want to play with Xavier Henry, who happened to be a senior and a McDonald All-American like him. So he said, if you sign Xavier Henry, I'm going to University of Miami. And Coach Calipari said, why? He says, because I played with him in the McDonald All-American games, and he played amongst a lot of great players. Speaking of John Wall talking about Xavier Henry, and he said, I couldn't play with him, right? Like we all wanted, like we were on different pages than him, right? We wanted to play selfless, and he was worried about his stats, his points, and making sure he got the MVP of the game. And I think to a certain point, when a couple come together, man, you're forming a team, and that team has to be on the same page. And if it's not, you're inviting or invoking a lot of havoc and chaos into the relationship that doesn't need to be there. Marriage is hard. It's the biggest blessing in your life, and it can be the biggest burden, but it has incredible tools to reinvigorate you and really rewire you to be the kind of person God wants you to be.
So, 40 years ago, I want to tell y'all this quick story. 40 years ago when I got married, I'm sitting in the Catholic church because my wife at that time, she was Catholic. And she's sitting on this swivel chair, and you got the priest and you got me. And he swings it, she's facing me like this. He swings her chair around to him, and he says to her, what religion is your husband to be? And at that time, I didn't believe in any kind of religion because I was just one of those rebels at that time. And she said, he doesn't have a religion. And I said to him the same thing. So he turns her around and he says, this is going to be an unequally yoked relationship. And then he says to her, how are you going to raise your children? And in terms of whether they were going to be a Catholic or not. And I swing her back around to me. This is so funny. Away from the priest. And I said, I don't see this as unequally yoked. I'm black, you're black. The priest was white, by the way. I'm black, you're black. I love you and you love me. What is unequally yoked about that? And so my wife is sitting there. I said, I'm here because I love you. So I'm going to sit here with this priest and have him tell me that you and I are unequally yoked. So he proceeded to go on, and he said to her, if you wish to continue this relationship, that's fine. Would you guys like to have counseling? I said, no, thank you. I counsel myself. he says, well, are you going to have a take of the body, the bread? I said, no, you're not going to get none of that bread out of there and put it in my mouth. I don't even know what that is. So why would I do that? Well, what about putting the oil on your head? I said, no, you can't do that to me. You could do it to my wife because she's accustomed to that, and so forth. So I think what he missed was that moment of selflessness that carried my relationship to 40 years. Because I didn't mind what she did, nor was I critical of her faith. I just said I didn't understand what you were doing when you're giving me bread at crackers or whatever, and drinking the wine, which we know what it is now. But so
Yeah.
Sometimes when we say unequally yoked, and I say 40 years now because here's a marriage that literally worked. So sometimes it's more important to be selfless than to be even so-called equally yoked. Because when you're selfless, you're willing to sacrifice yourself and to benefit the other people. So, so when I heard that word and that this was going to be the topic for this week, I was so curious on how we were going to go after it. And I was very interested to find out the science aspect of this word as well. So I wanted to have Chalet chime in for us while we got Dr. Faith trying to fix up some things. Chalet, how you doing?
All right, I've been listening because I think it's so important.
What's your thought?
This topic is so important to talk about when you're talking about unequally yoked, because I see it from both perspectives. When Pastor Knox talked about it being from the religious perspective or the spiritual perspective of, being religious. Then I'm hearing you, Coach Gustus, kind of saying the selflessness kind of took over, even like transcended, the fact that maybe at that time you weren't not even a Catholic, you didn't even know what it was, right? So I do think there's a maturity level to the whole phrase of being unequally yoked. When I see unequally yoked, I think of not, yes, I think of the religious aspect, but more importantly, I think about the aspect of I have this capacity to love, and maybe you don't have this capacity to love. So I'm always going to be looking to get something out of you that I can't get out of you because you're not even, in my same sphere when it comes to certain things. So we're unequally yoked. Or I believe that children need discipline. You believe children should be free, So I think of unequally yoked as far as belief systems, values, attitudes, and even upbringing, the way that, I'm not saying that two people that were raised differently can't be together, but I will say if there's not a maturity level to it or a selflessness to it, that can become a major issue in any relationship.
And that becomes, Chalet, you're so right. Pastor, were you going to say something there?
Yeah, if you're just talking about religion, I'm not talking about the form of a relationship. Paul said in 1 Timothy, which I think is important, he says, you have a form of godliness, but really no power. I'm more interested in the power of a relationship and how that works, because when I listen to Coach, principally, you are absolutely spot on. You know what I mean? Like the principle of being selfless, putting somebody ahead of your own, particularly your woman, and your woman is equally committed to doing that for you, finding your happiness by bringing happiness to your spouse. Principally, man, faith, no faith. Like if you do that in a relationship, great things are going to happen, period. The next level for me is not just the principal piece of it, the spiritual component of it, right? Like having that internal empowerment to do what you ain't able to do, right? To be what you ain't able to be, to show up in a way that wasn't shown up in your own childhood, you know what I'm saying? To be something you ain't for someone else. And so for me, I have found that in the scriptures, I've found that in my relationship with God, to give me what I don't particularly have because it was never modeled for me. You know what I'm saying? Like I grew up in a single parent home. My dad's been married 4 times. Mother never got married. I grew up on a block where there was only one intact family. I've been brailing my way through marriage my whole life. You know what I mean? Like blindly brailing my way through it. And yet the only reason it's been successful is because Jesus has been at the center of it. And we have both have been equally committed to each other and putting each other's interest ahead of our own. Now, that doesn't mean we always pass the test. We certainly are imperfect, but I think just on a principle level, Doc, let me tell you the most powerful thing that you ever did, and I always talk about this. I came to Brooklyn a couple years ago. Coach picked me up, took me to my Airbnb. We hollered all night. There was a bunch of us staying in the Airbnb. He was in my room with a couple of guys. I fell asleep, woke up in the morning, and Coach was literally sleeping on a super small couch. I was like, this brother stayed here all night. He could have went home. But this brother stayed here all night. Woke up, took us to breakfast, and it left such an imprint on me in terms of how I wanted to be in the world, how I wanted to treat people, how I wanted to be a servant to others. And so that DNA is just in you, Coach. I know selfish religious people.
Well, you know what?
Practice that principally, huh?
It is. That could be it. And you know what the thing about it also is we do have an example. And you just mentioned the example being Jesus. So who could be more selfless? He showed us how to do it, you know? So, but I do go back to that word selfless because out of all the things in the relationship, I think is your ability to be selfless, the ability to empathize. And I use that word so much, we had it last night, where are you empathizing with the other person? Put yourself in the other person spirit and their energies and so forth. So, and I've also seen people do that for me, by the way. So I've followed that sequence. Dr. Babe, we're so happy to have you back. And you were talking about apples and oranges. So, and we got hungry, went out and got some. What's going on with the apple and orange? You want to finish that thought up?
Well, the only thing that I will say is that the only thing they have in common is that they're fruit, right? That's the only thing they have in common. And other than that, there's nothing else. So when you start talking about equally yoked, as Pastor stated, one can't be selfless for the other because they're really like, it's almost like two different species trying to come together. So how can an apple be selfless for, you know, the needs of an orange? You know, they both need sunlight. So I can't say, I'm going to go hide in the shade while you take the sunlight. So it's important that I think, you know, marriage is hard enough. Marriage is hard enough. So if you get two people who are unequally yoked and, you know, one that cannot be selfless to the point where they're putting the other one first, that they're meeting the other need, that they can actually empathize and stand in those shoes, that's an uphill battle. As a therapist, do I believe that it can be done? Yeah. I believe in all things, but you make the road a whole lot harder doing it that way. There are people who are, you know, they're Republicans married to Democrats. You know, there are people from different religious backgrounds who are married, but those are hard roads because you're denying a part of the essence of oneself in order to try to, as Coach said, as Pastor said, the whole goal is to come together as one. So when you're denying such a pivotal part of yourself, it's very difficult, you know, to join together in those important spaces as one.
You know, it's interesting you said that, and I kind of, before I got married, I mainly subscribed to what Chalet, her definition, belief and values, and a sense of selflessness. Knowing that I was marrying this lady that was raised a Catholic, and here I'm coming into a relationship. She's raised a Catholic, and I done been around Catholic, Jehovah's Witnesses, Muslims, and all in my family. And probably the reason why I did not take to any religions, because basically every time they got together, it was like a big fight, literally. And I just couldn't understand. Y'all so peaceful and everything. You're fighting because of that. So it kind of turned me away. My whole family was into the church, and I wouldn't go there because I didn't see them practicing what they were preaching. So that also gave me a issue. But I say that because if you are selfless, you can find a way, as even as an orange and an apple, to come together. But it would take the selflessness, because I'm looking at collaboration now. So that relationship, we can collaborate. I know there's some things that my wife brings to the table that I cannot bring to the table. She does that, and she does that well. She was raised up with a mother and a father. I only had a mother that died at the age of 9, and I'm in the streets, you know? And so those was 2 apples and oranges, but I was willing to see what it is that she brought to the table and utilize those things. I know I could not be an apple, but I can sure eat from the apple. No, I'm giving her the orange because we already ate from the apple, and that wasn't the right thing, right, Pastor? We switch her. She got the orange. I'm the apple now. But I say that because it's some kind of collaboration that has to take place. So I want to see. I know Omar is sitting over there looking like a yoke. What are your thoughts on that, Omar? Omar, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I apologize. I was unmuting mine. It's kind of ironic because, like I was saying to a friend of mine when I was thinking about this subject, is I like to look at, it's not just about being compatible, because a lot of compatible people kind of go separate ways. It's about creating an environment. Coach, you know me well. I like to use the creator's universal examples. And no pun intended, I study the universe, and in it, it's you and I make a verse. So whether or not, it's like you have to be there for each other. So I can speak all day, but if there's no one there to listen, who am I really talking to? You know what I'm saying? Are we relatable? And another thing I really wanted you to touch upon was relationship. I think people have a two different confusion between being relatable and being in a relations. I think, you know, two people that don't relate can still have relations. So I really would like for you to talk to that point. But for me, it's just creating the environment that, you see, whenever you see someone in a good relationship, what you always say, they're in their own universe. So sometimes you have to kind of like, how do I say, you have to just create the environment for your relations to foster, because people put their thoughts, people like, just like the pastor, they'll look at you and tell you y'all are not equally yoked, but you can't see the gravitational pull between those people. You don't see where, they depend on each other. So I think like you were saying, you got to focus on what each other bring to the table instead of what outside forces. Because no offense, I know you could, like they say, love also breeds in like harsh environments, or when people are secluded, no pun intended, quarantine. But it's because now you get to see the person without all these other things interjecting on your relationship. So that's why I think it's kind of unique conversation, because it's more about the two people than it is about anything else. Like you said, you can't really let no one come in and interject and tell you what is, what not. Y'all have to really be there for each other. Once you're there for each other, I don't see how can you not be equally yoked the way the creator created all of us to kind of like work together.
You know what is so interesting, because when I saw the power that priest had over my wife to be, it was quite painstaking, to be honest with you. I'm sitting there and I'm listening and I'm watching my wife, so looking at him as if he was God, really, and I'm like, wow, and that's why I swung her back around to me, and bold enough, because I'm like, yo, listen, I love you you love me, you black, and I'm black. At that time, I was really into my blackness, so I didn't really care about what it is. So it's so important that what you just said, create an environment so that we can grow. But when I first met my wife, I knew that that was going to be my wife, period. So I guess that yoke came in as well, you know, in terms of me making that decision. And I knew that I have to be selfless in order for me to do that. And I may have been like Pastor Eric said, that was something that's probably was in me as well. But at the same time, I see that as a tool that we need to be selfless at times. We got a question from Nicole. Do you have a question from someone?
Yes, we do. How do I find a healthy relationship when I was over-nurtured as a young boy by my mother, and now I feel I'm not supported by my partner when she doesn't do it for me?
Dr. Faith?
I couldn't hear that. It broke up, Nicole.
She said that she wanted, the person wanted to know if they were very nurtured by their mother, a single mother nurturing a little boy, and now he grows up expecting the same thing from a woman and she doesn't give it to him. How does he deal with that? And if you don't want to get it, go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, I hope Pastor Knox and you kind of chime in on this one as well. It's a good thing that he recognizes what is going on with him. A mate is not a mom. And so you cannot have the same expectations of a mate as you have of your mom. Those are two totally different people, two totally different circumstances. As a matter of fact, well, I'll leave that there. You have expectations of a partner. And as Omar said, when you have two mature people coming to the table, you can collaborate on your needs. But you can have a nurturing relationship. I think all relationships should be nurturing, but on every level. I mean, if you expect to get from a mate what you have from your mom, you're not expecting a mate, you're looking for your mom. And that's not fair to a mate. So it's just time to reevaluate, become a bit introspective about what it means. I think this whole show is about male by birth, man by choice. So taking on the mantle of accepting the fact that when you take on a partner, this is a mature relationship, and you cannot expect from any woman, not your current mate or one in the future, to be your mom. You only have one blessed mother, and no one can take her shoes, nor can anyone take your mate's shoes. So and each come with their own gifts into your life. It's an unfair expectation, actually, to expect your mate to nurture as your mom or vice versa.
I'm gonna go to another woman because I like that. I want to keep building on that. Chalet?
Yes, I want to say too, just to add on to what Dr. Faith said, excellent answer. Yes, it can be your mom, but I was in that situation actually where single mother, and it was a cultural thing. So I want to say that sometimes being equally yoked, I looked at my ex-husband, looked like he had, he was a Christian like I was, looked like he really had good family values. Everything looked good, okay? It looked good from the outside, but there was a cultural difference, and the cultural difference was that his mother treated him almost like he was a king. And so when I stepped into the role of his wife, of course, I had no problem treating my husband like a king. Let me just say that first of all. Okay. Let me just make that clear. Okay. But she treated him with no responsibility, which is a difference, right? So he didn't have to do anything to be treated like a king. He was just, because he was born a male, he was automatically, and this was a cultural thing, treated, at a higher level. Like the girls had to do all the work in the house. He didn't have to do it. So when he married me, he expected the same thing out of me, even when he wasn't working, even when he wasn't, doing what he was supposed to do as a man. He expected me to fulfill these roles of being, his mom, right? So it was okay for him to go out and cheat. I had to still cook for him and do what I had to do as a wife, because that was my title. And there's a great essay by Judy Brady that says, I Want a Wife. It's really interesting if you ever read it. It's short. And so I will say that if you're in a situation like that, you really have to check and see, you know, what is this person really going to grow? Because what I found, I was in a relationship for over 10 years, is that he was not willing to grow. He was not willing to grow with me. He did not want to change those stereotypical roles. And this is what he was taught. And so he was looking for a mother in me, and I couldn't fulfill that. So the relationship was stagnant because of the fact that I felt empty. I wasn't getting what I needed to get from him as a partner, because a relationship is a partnership. And he wasn't, you know, and it was like I was always giving. And in return, he was always taking. So that is what happens. You will feel like there's a part of you that becomes empty if you allow these things to, you know, impact your relationship without setting boundaries.
So when you met him, I just want to follow up on a question. Pastor. When you met him and you didn't see the relationship that he had with his mother?
Yes, I saw it. It's partly my fault. I'm not going to say I didn't take responsibility.
Wait, we ain't talking about fault, but I'm just saying for future reference, if
Yes.
you look at this man and you see, I'm sure you was around the house and you saw.
But it was part of my ignorance too, because I didn't know about the cultural differences. Like, even though I was raised in Brooklyn, New York, I didn't know that, you know, I saw it as being, it was actually a thing that impressed me, because I thought, oh, this is really love. He loves his mother. You know, look at the way they treat each other. She's always kissing him. He's always hugging her. You know, there was a love thing. So I didn't see the depth of, you know, what he would be expecting from me, because the way his mother treated him and what he would be. So that was a part of the ignorance in my, you know, point.
All right, Pastor.
Yeah, you know, what's interesting, in the Bible, Ephesians 5 verse 31 says, for this reason, a man will leave his mother and father and be joined or unite with his wife, right? And a lot of marriages break down mainly because either the man or woman don't know how to leave. They don't know how to cut their apron strings from their family. And part of that, you know, leaving sort of how you were raised to become one whole brand new unit is very difficult to navigate. And so, you know, if a man don't know how to cut the apron strings and he's still leaning on his mom, even though he's got a wife, that's going to be a problem. And vice versa. If the girl's a daddy's girl, but always leaning on dad, but not leaning into her husband, that's going to be a problem. And so I know for me, when we got married, one of them, I mean, just practically the way this worked itself out, you know, my wife and I, we made an agreement that if we got into any kind of heated argument, that I was not running to my mom, I ain't running to my pop to try and fix it for me. She's not gonna run to her mom or run to her dad to try and fix it, because after me and my wife, you know, like apologized to each other and repaired the relationship, now her mom is still mad at me or vice versa. And so, you know, I just think at the end of the day, man, if you really want to have a successful marriage, you got to learn how to leave and cut those apron strings and to create something different, right? Different from your own family experience. Not that you won't draw from them, but to create something different from them. And when that's not in place, man, that relationship's going to cause a lot of havoc.
So what you got to be careful of, new mother of an 11-year-old, right, son, oftentimes the mother, especially in our community, the mother raised their daughters and they love their sons. And in the book, Counter the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys, Dr. Kadvufji, he speaks about that. He speaks about how our mothers raising our daughters because they feel that they have to raise them up, be responsible and take care of this, because you never have to depend on a man, and you raising that daughter and giving her that independence and everything. And what you're doing is you're loving and cuddle your son. And you're saying to your son, you ain't got to wash no dishes. You don't have to. And to me, that doesn't help us. It puts us in that bind. So a lot of times, that's probably what was the case with your husband as well. Nicole, you got another question?
Yes, we do. This is for Dr. Faith. Why do we choose the same type of partner even though our characters and our personalities don't work together?
Well, that's a great question. We end up choosing the same partners because we've developed either a conscious or unconscious memory of a prototype of something. So things happen in our childhood, and most of the time these things happen prior to us having language or having the requisite brain development to apply appropriate meaning to what we see or what we witness. And when we don't have appropriate languaging or proper brain development to put it in its proper perspective, the brain just does what it does. It is non-discriminating. It will attach a meaning to that, to whatever that prototype is. I mentioned a story just the other day. I'm not sure that I mentioned it to someone else, but I will mention it here. Let's say that we have a child 0 to 3. Before the child has requisite language or brain development, right? The child witnesses an angry dad who's angry about work, let's say, who comes home, has a seat. Mom comes over to comfort dad. This is what this 3-year-old is witnessing, right? The father gets up in a rage just because he's upset. Mom knocks mom off balance. Mom gets up, her nose is bleeding, right? But then she goes over to him and continues to comfort him. Now, at 3 years old, that child doesn't know how to interpret that. But the brain will file it away and put meaning to it. And that scenario can be encoded as, 1, men abuse women, or dad abuse moms and moms stay, or that all men beat women, okay? All men are abusive. Now, that's a very unconscious thing that just happened, and it's filed away. This thing that we call a brain is electromagnetic, and we attract stuff into our environment. It's a very spiritual thing, but we attract what we believe into our environment. So somewhere that was filed away as a belief that men beat women, women stay. So at 15, when she has her first boyfriend, she begins to attract people into her space based on that belief who also does the same thing. And she'll continue to do that until either 1, mom tells a story, you know, honey, there was a time when your dad, you know, got laid off from work. He was very upset, and I hit my nose and everything. And then there's that light bulb moment. Or when she's then working with a therapist who knows and understands that there is something underneath that's got her attracting this same person at 15, the same person at 20, the same person at 30, because of that implicit or unconscious memory that's been developed. Now, once the unconscious is made conscious, we can then make a different decision. A belief is a decision, is really what a belief is, right? That's what that is. And once we change that belief system, that, oh no, that's not really what happened, because it's not what happened. Dad didn't hit mom. Dad did not hit mom. Mom tumbled over. Once we challenge that belief, establish a new belief system around men, who men are, that will change her relationship with every man. And she'll begin to attract, with practice, the right partner into her private space. So we keep choosing the same person, just a different name, until we figure out what's going on with us, what's going on mentally. There's an unconscious belief about whatever it is, and we keep attracting the same thing.
I once told
I hope that was simple enough.
I once told a couple that was in a lot of arguments and fights early on in their relationship as they got married. And I went to them and I told them, I said, how many relationships have you guys had before y'all met each other? And they didn't want to give me the number, but one said about 10, 15, and another one said a little conservative and tried to say about 8. And I said, were you in love with any of those relationships? And they said, yeah. I said, what happened? And they said, well, it didn't work. So I said, they failed, right? He said, you can say that, yes. So I said, think about it. You two guys are coming into a relationship and the last thing you remember, is a failed relationship, regardless of way. So you're bringing that failed relationship together. Did you ever take the time to look at the why in your failures in your relationship? Because you're bringing that together. And I really got them to start to think about, what are we going to do now? So Dr. Faith just gave a beautiful structure on what should we do, what the reason why it occurred, but the question, what are you going to do afterwards? And that's why I can see why one of our folks said that she wanted her boyfriend to go to get some help, psychological, get some counseling. She said before she go out with anybody, she wants them to have counseling. And y'all both going to go together, because maybe she want to know why you fell and why I fell, so that we could bring that together, and somebody like Dr. Faith can sort that out. And it's getting that serious, by the way. It's really getting that serious with relationships, because relationships are failing. I know in the churches, they have a lot of counseling that take place prior to the relationships, and people getting married. And still we having some major challenges because the percentage of marriages are not staying together. And I still say it goes back to that one word, selflessness, and in defining it. Yes, Dr. Faith.
But I also think it speaks to people not knowing themselves. We don't know ourselves. We live with ourselves every day. And until we become introspective and really take a look at, as you mentioned, Coach, looking at, why those relationships didn't work. So I have to own my part and my responsibility in that, right? So that means you were asking me to look at something heretofore that I could not see about myself. And that's a big deal. That's why it's really good to have a mirror, be it a therapist or a real friend that will call you on your stuff and say, listen, this is what's going on. This is what I see anyway. So, are you showing up in your own life? Are you being accountable? Do you take responsibility? Are you a loving person? Are you a giver? Are, just whatever it is, we're called in to become introspective and to look at ourselves in a way that we hadn't heretofore done. Because what we typically do is move from the hurt and pain and then move on, right, to another relationship, porting the whole package of us, right? Because we didn't evaluate what happened. So the same stuff, we're just porting the same bag, taking it to somebody else, while also choosing a very similar personality. So we have to get to know ourselves. Before we get to the pastor to receive counseling for marriage, we need to get to know ourselves.
Yeah, wow.
I want to say that, Coach, too, sometimes that's a hard thing to do. We hear this cliche, get to know yourself. And I talk about this a lot, about sometimes we don't even know where to start. Martin Luther King talks about something when he's talking about the movements that he led. And he said ever so often he does what he calls a self-purification process. And this was a process in which he actually had to look at himself and see, what was his motives and were they pure? And so I think we have to do the same thing in relationship. We have to go through a self-purification process. Some of us are serial relationship people. And I think that's detrimental to our beings, because like Dr. Faith said, we never get to really see ourselves. We never get to really see why things ended the way they did, why things began, why we choose the people we choose. And so just doing simple things like, taking ourselves out, studying ourselves. What are our key habits in certain relationships? What is the key factor? I did this for myself. What was the key factor that made me choose the people that I chose to be in a relationship? And once I found that out, it really told me something about myself, or what I was missing and what I needed to do. So I think that's important, that we all go through a self-purification process. So,
I definitely believe that people need a coach or a counselor. And especially coaches, because coaches will push you to where you want to go. And that's all of us, especially when you tell me that you're trying to get to a destination. And then when we talk, you're not willing to pay the price to get there. I always tell, I have a saying, the position I'm in today is my fault. And they say, well, why do you always say that's your fault? I said, because I want to render the other person powerless. And when I know it's my fault, then I'll begin to look at me and examine me. I cannot examine the other person. I got to examine me. What did I do to get in this position? By the way, not always the negative position I'm in, but the great position. That beautiful wife that I got and my kids, that's my fault. You don't just give me the blame for the bad things, give me the blame for all the good things as well. But I love that because when I start thinking like that, the position that I'm in today is my fault. That's when I could be doing an effective self-evaluation, because now I'm beginning, what did I do good? What I did very well to get into this mission? And then what are the things that I did not do that I can improve on so that I can get better at it and get better at it? And then you attack it by going out and finding things to get better at. So what I always say, inspect what you expect before you give respect or call yourself a suspect. You can be a suspect or you could be respected. But you first got to inspect all the expectations that you have for yourself. And then you just write them down. This is what I do all the time. And it's a reassessment of myself. What can I do better? How can I say things better? How can I communicate things better? Especially when it comes to my wife, because as you get older, things change. Everyone changes. You know, I never forget when my wife got men on pause. I call it men on pause. And men on pause, menopause. When that happened, this woman changed. We never experienced this. Could you imagine being a man that just never experienced this woman opening and closing the windows and turning on the air conditioner, turning on, I'm hot, I'm cold, I don't want you to touch me, all of those things. And people have to know what is taking place with your wife if you love her. Become selfless, find out. So what I did is I went out and I said, listen, I spoke to every woman I could imagine that was going through this before my wife, and they explained to me what she was going through. Then I read books because I wanted to help her through this so she can grow. The women told me, don't worry, coach, she's going to get through this. So this is what I had to evaluate myself, because a man could become very selfish at that time because they feel like they're being rejected. And we getting older as well, and the last thing we want to do is to think that we're not performing properly. And that's another thing, because now your wife is turning away from you, she's too hot, she's too cold, she's sweating, she got all those different things that take place. So as we go in time, we have to continue to reevaluate ourselves. I don't care what it is. I had a book, Sex at 40, then I got another book, Sex After 50. I'm looking for the book, Sex After 65, 60. I think they think after 60, you don't need to have that. But the point I'm making is I'm willing to learn each level. You have not arrived. You're going to continue to learn. And that's so important. So Omar, what's your thoughts on this? And you've been listening for a while. I know when you listen like that, I know I got some energy. Make sure you put yourself on there.
Well, I'm just glad to, like you said, witness, because you know, I'm going through a lot of those changes as a young man myself. But the thing that the two most important things I'm hearing is, one is discipline. You know, after a certain age, you gotta just get out of that autopilot relationship mode. And second, I guess I would call it conscious loving, or being a conscious mate. Be conscious of your surroundings, be conscious of the changes in the other person, and hopefully they'll be conscious of the changes within you as well and appreciate it. And even hearing you speak, you know, I'm not saying I have regrets, but there's a lot of things I could have done better in my previous relationships, and now consciously I will take the steps going forward to add a lot of this stuff. That's why I've been here quiet. I'm actually at awe. I feel a lot of men need to hear this conversation, because we raised watching TV. You say things like, I'm not going to do like how, you know, you see other people doing relationships, but you're kind of on the autopilot. You're more reactionary than responsive,
Yes.
responding. So I really appreciate that. because, you know, that's another thing. We feel also as like we gotta be a superhero. We gotta, you know, help at the speed of light. But you took a time out to say, hey, I gotta do my research. I gotta go out in the field. We always feel we have to answer or fix things on a moment, and that's usually, it's not that we're selfish. It's just we feel, like you said, insufficient because you can't help or you don't have understanding. But sometimes I take the time out to go get that understanding. So I really appreciate that, Coach. And I definitely appreciate the women's side of you, because I was a little nervous. I thought we was gonna get beat up on this one, but it was very nurturing and kind to us.
You know, Omar, one thing about it, I always tell guys when they enter my daughter's life, it's easy to obtain, much more difficult to maintain. You have to understand the maintenance that it takes to have a wife. And I know Pastor Knox just said, you know, that's not an easy thing, but the same thing with a woman. She has to understand how the maintenance it takes with a man. I see Nicole has another question.
Our question is, can we talk about what happens when you become sexually involved with someone?
When you become sexually involved with them,
Yes.
at that moment, yeah, feel kind of good. No, I'm just joking. Oh boy. When do you become sexually involved? Okay, and by the way, there's a difference. See, people misinterpret this. There's a difference between having sex and making love. All right, so sex is an act that you do. Love is an act as well, but it happens way before having sex. So I try to tell younger men what it means to make love to your wife. It starts by maybe washing the dishes that night. It starts by maybe fixing her a meal. That's all part of the getting to the nitty gritty. That's what y'all call the dessert for men. And you can't wait till you jump into the bed with any woman, be honest with you, but especially when it comes to someone you've been around. So there's a difference in lovemaking. Starts way before you get to the bed. Listening to her, and even just turning off the game one time. If you want your sex life to be fantastic, turn the game off and just sit down and talk to her. You know your love life is going to be off. It's going to be off the chain. But I see the difference between sex and making love. Males, they have a tendency of doing sex and they don't care when they do it, how they ain't trying to do no love stuff. They just want to get it on and get it out. But when you're making love, that's a whole nother scene that I have. Now I know from a biblical standpoint, Pastor Knox, I know he has a whole theory about sex before marriage. Pastor, what's your thoughts on that? It's okay to make love before marriage, but not have sex.
My perspective is wait. I think, you know, when you talk about being sexually compatible, I think sometimes people talk about, you know, are we compatible in terms of ecstasy? And that's not what sexual compatibility is about. It's not about how good sex is or how often you have it. Really, it's about intimacy. And part of that occurs through a deep commitment of love and trust and respect that deepens in a monogamous relationship that's self-giving and and in the confines of a covenant relationship. So, you know, I think in our culture today, when we think about how we get there to the ideal of sex and marriage, and do we do it before, do we do it after? You know, the culture says physically you see somebody, you're attracted to them. So you go hollow, right? And you get to know them socially. And after you get to know them socially, boom, you get into a physical relationship with them and you decide after that, do I want to jump the broom? And then you do the legal arrangement, right? The Christian courtship is completely different because it starts off for certainly socially, you know what I mean? And to a certain degree, you know, like, are you drawn to that person? But it starts socially. Then it moves spiritually, you know, like, should we be yoked? Are we on the same trajectory? And then once you figure that out, then what happens is the legal component, right? Like you say your vows between God and man, you jump the broom, and then the physical consummation of that relationship happens. So I'm a big proponent of that. And I say that as a former recovering dog, because I was, right? Like I was super promiscuous from middle school, high school, athlete, you know, went to college, and then I got saved and I started practicing celibacy, not as a way of just being disciplined, but just a way of rewiring my mind in terms of how I saw my future wife and to get prepared for her. And so if you think sexual compatibility is about, you know, is she going to give it up enough? And how often are we going to have it? And are we compatible? I think you missed the whole point of two becoming one, that oneness of sex, right? Really, it's about achieving intimacy. And that's the reason why we lay down with people. That's why some people are very promiscuous, because they're chasing that intimacy. They're trying to get out of that relationship what they didn't get from their parents. They're trying to get that out of that relationship that, in my personal faith grid, that you can only get from Christ. So that's kind of where I'm at on the whole sex piece.
Yeah, that sounds very nice, Pastor. Let me
I
ask
waited,
you
man, like I practiced that, man. My 20s, man. I waited.
okay, hold on a second. I'm going to ask
Yeah.
you a question on it, because I'm going to be like the
Yeah.
young people when they ask me in the school and I tell them to wait. You need to be able to tell these young folks that are looking at this, how do I wait? Because we never discussed that. We kind of dance around that, but there's a feeling that comes in, even in the Christian folks, because they don't follow that they ain't waiting either. So how do I wait? Because that wait thing that you're talking about is, I get this feeling, Pastor, man to man, I'm getting this feeling with this girl. She kissed me and stuff is happening to me. Tell me how I'm supposed to wait. Tell me what steps I should take to wait. Because you've been there, so you probably have some answers for our young people that are watching this here, how they can wait.
You know what, man? When I got, like I said, when I became a Christian, I met a couple, and it was a divine act of God, because I never saw one successful marriage my whole childhood, right? Like I grew up with a lot of abuse. And so I wanted to be what I didn't see. I wanted to become and have that kind of relationship. And so I met a married couple actually in college that was, you know, that they were doing it, you know, at a high level. I mean, they really loved each other, and they really modeled what I wanted it to be in terms of me and my spouse one day when we got married. So later on, when I met my wife, you know, it was just simple as sitting down and having some people that I could be held accountable to, like that could talk me through this relationship. And it was tough. Like, you know, like the practice, like me and my wife said, hey, we're going to wait till we get married before we start having sex. It was tough, but we had people that we were accountable to, you know what I'm saying? And we set parameters on our relationship, you know, at midnight, I left, you know, I made sure I wasn't kind of hovering around her house too late. You know what I'm saying? Prayer was important to our relationship. Going to church and spirituality was important to our relationship. Talking about our feelings toward each other and the temptation of wanting to betray a commitment we made before we got married, like talking about that stuff, disempowered it. I'm not saying you got to be religious and say, I ain't going to do this or that. No, I'm talking about being honest, transparent about where you two are in your relationship, being honest about how you feel about each other, knowing where the temptations are, knowing that you got people that are gonna hold you accountable about that relationship, and that you can go talk to them. It's work. It was work. All through my 20s to be celibate was not easy. Trust that. But I did it.
Okay.
By the grace of God.
Yeah.
And one of the best decisions I ever made. And then I got married in my 30s.
And you did it for your season, so it's going to be very. And we proud of you. But I like to think that if a young person said that you asking me to wait, and and you guys didn't, you know, are you suggesting I wait, or but you kind of went through? Because do you tell them that story that, hey, you know what, I did this, and this. This is why young people think, especially when I communicate with them, I see how they be thinking. They're like, well, coach, did you wait? And, you know, especially this generation, they want to know what you did, how you did it, and then they're going to ask, don't do as you say, do it what you did. So I'm already disqualified to tell them to wait. I'm going to be honest right up on it and so forth, because basically I don't even know how that exists. You do. You have a little bit about it, but they will question that portion about it. Yeah.
But coach, you successful. Why? Because all of your life has been defined by not going with status quo and swimming upstream. And that's the bottom line. Anything you want to be successful in life, you got to be the odd bird, right? Swim upstream, do it different. And that's
If
what
I can
decided.
just jump,
Yeah, I was about to say, as
if I could just jump in there for a minute and just say
right.
that.
And you get it next, okay?
Yeah, just want to say that, you know, as a person who's young, I just want to say that people see sex differently. It is not the way, sex is not seen the same way by men or women. Some people feel like sex is just sex. Matter of fact, there's this whole liberation movement with women to say, if I want to be sexually free and I want to sleep with 10 guys, that's the way that I should feel. And there is, you know, you guys are talking from a spiritual aspect of sex and from an aspect of intimacy and wanting to be loved. These days, some people are just having sex just for the feeling. They're not even thinking about love and intimacy. They will tell you straight off the gamut, this is what I want to do, and that's it. So I think that's a real aspect that a lot of people are doing. And now, do I think that the underlying issue is people want intimacy and they want to be loved? Yes, but there's so many people out here that just really just want sex, you know? And so that's something that we're dealing with these days. And how do you deal with that? You know, and I think the problem comes is when men and women get sex intertwined. They get it intertwined with intimacy. They think that sex brings intimacy automatically, right? Or that a relationship develops because you have sex with somebody. It just doesn't happen like that anymore, unfortunately. With these new liberation, sexual freedom kind of like movements, it's becoming more, and even for me as a woman who was married, you know, to say I'm gonna be celibate, I don't know if I could do that at this point, because I know what I like sexually, first of all. Number two, when I feel like I find someone who's intimate and that is marriage material, I know that's something that I wanna share with them. So what I say to young people, my students, when they come to me, a lot of times they're like, if I talk to them about sex and I'm talking about sex as far as relationships, they're like, what are you talking about? I just want to have sex with the person. I don't care about being with them. And I'm like, what? That's like foreign to me, you know? But it's a reality of what the youth are dealing with today.
Wow. Go ahead, Omar.
Well, what I tell the younger people that come to me, I tell them, stop killing yourself. Because no offense, you know, I have no shame in saying I'm a pretty attractive male. As you can see, I'm pretty healthy. I outrun half the kids who's 19, 20 years old because I understand something which is called, they have a very bad sex education. And the same things that these movements or things are created, destabilize our community's energy. So I tell them, all right, so if intimacy, do you get up after having sex and write a book? Do you get up and want to go play ball? No, you're dead, you're dying. Look at the science of it. And they said, so what am I supposed to do when I get horny? I said, well, Google sex transmutation. Take that energy, harness it like electricity, apply it to something else. And to be honest, now, you know, for my business out there, I'm a Scorpio. By my sign, I'm supposed to be very sexually active. So whenever I do feel like I have my partner Kevin tell you, I got 2 buckets right there, I do push-ups. And you can see that I'm very sexual active by what I transmute it into. Also, it creates creativity. I let kids know that it takes 4 ounces of blood to make just 1 shot of sperm. Now imagine how much of your blood you're wasting. You got to re-educate these kids on how damaging it is to their body. I'm like, why do you think at a certain age you can't do certain things? Why do you think impotency is so high? So when they do the research and they Google, they come out like, whoa, I can't believe this. I didn't even know what sex, I didn't even know how my penis worked. So we have to re-educate our children what sex is. It's not what you think it is. It's way more powerful than what you think it is. And you'd be surprised. When a kid truly understands what something's worth, they won't share it.
And the soul ties that develop because of sex. That needs to be a message, you know?
Yeah. And the Dr. Faith, what is the science behind women and men with this sexual thing, especially when it comes to, I know there's a combination of when you sleep with someone, you bring their spirit in with you as well. And then there's a chemical imbalancing that takes place as well. I heard that somewhere. I'm trying to get something. I don't know. I know, Pastor, you probably can address the sleeping with different people, and it's a spirit that goes on to another person once you do that. And then I just was wondering, are there any science psychologically or some sort of things that are taking place and why kids are having so much sex? Is it because what they're watching, is their brain being stimulated to just have sex like that? I'm not sure. What's your thoughts?
There's a whole lot to unpack there, and I'll try to be quick because I think they're trying to get us to wrap up. So I'm going to try to be really, really quick in just saying, you know, what happens. So everything that has been said is absolutely on point. You know, people don't value intimacy anymore. Sex is an act. There is no bonding, and there's a whole lot to unpack there. But the bottom line is, when we decide to give ourselves, that part of ourselves, to someone else, we're giving that part, that Pandora's box, to that person and everyone else that person has slept with, number one. And then secondly, if we would tend to think that we're just having a hookup, you know, we're just going and it's just the sex and nothing else is going on. But because there's been a chemical exchange there, and you can actually measure this. Let's say that they think it's just a hookup. Now you're in a crowded room, you know, there's a party and you just happen to be at the party. If that person walks in the room, that was just a hookup, there is an actual chemical reaction that can be measured in the body, that body is going to react simply because you saw that person walk into the room, that it was only a hookup. That chemical exchange is just that powerful. So when we decide to connect that way, right, before really getting to know that person or taking it very seriously, right, when there's an argument, when there is a parting of the ways, then it's not so easy to just walk away. Thus, a disagreement or an argument could potentially ensue, right? Or we don't really look at that person quite the same way. Whereas if we weren't involved and there was some kind of dispute, well, you could more readily walk away and respect the person, perhaps speak later on, hi, how are you? That's a very different scenario when there's been a chemical exchange. So there's more of a tearing away, which is a tearing away of spirits, if you will, more so than just being able to walk away. So it's about owning that, though. There's a responsibility in me maintaining the sanctity of my body. That's a treasure chest. That is a treasure chest. It's your treasure, both for men and for women. And so to be discriminating about whom you give that gift to is important, because that's exactly what it is.
And you know that some men now, especially the young people, the ladies are pressing up on the guys because they got their freedom, and they're like, look, we're not going to suppress our feelings. We've done this enough. My mother did it, my grandmother did it, and so forth. Y'all saying, and then you're going to say, I'm not a lady. Meanwhile, you as a man, you could go around and do anything that you want to do. But now the young ladies are doing it, and I'm seeing a lot of hurt men out there, hurt men. Really, because these women are doing similar what they did to them. You know, hey, I just want to have sex with you and so forth. I don't want to have nothing to do with you. You don't bring nothing to the table. But that sexual thing right now, I got a job. I'm educated. I got all this stuff. Just come in, do what you got to do, and leave. I'm not trying to get caught up into a relationship with you. And it's amazing how this thing is flipped. And I see some men coming with their heads down, feeling like, wow, you know, the change is done. What are the spiritual complications? And I'm going to close on this. But Pastor, I want to get from you, what are the spiritual complications of having women and men having sex with different partners from time to time? Is there any spiritual
Yeah, I just think, just real quick, and I know we'll wrap it up. I just think the soul and spiritual ties that bind when you enter into that sexual relationship with somebody, you know what I mean? Like you invite, I mean, I'm pretty much saying what everyone on this panel said, which is you just invite all the partners that person has slept with, and the other way around as well. So, you know, I think people don't understand, you know, sin is sin, but what makes sexual sin more grievous is that you sin against the body. Like it's like taking a sledgehammer to your body, right? Taking a sledgehammer to your design as a human being made in the image of God, right? And you wither yourself emotionally, spiritually, physically, and in other ways. So just the soul emotional ties that happen with it are very powerful, and the Bible speaks to it.
So we can safely say, because I noticed you hesitated a little bit when you was going to say sexual intimacy and sexual relationship. And we could safely say what Chalet is talking about is a sexual act.
Yes.
You know, basically the young people are saying, hey, we need to have a sexual act. That's plain and simple. I ain't trying to have a relationship with you. I ain't trying to intimacy you. I ain't trying to do that neither. I'm just basically want to have a sexual act.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Man, this has been crazy, man. You guys that went from, and this is all came from the yoke. So it's amazing. First of all, I want to thank everybody for coming on. In the beginning of the show, I forgot to say that I definitely want to apologize on behalf of all the fathers that haven't been there for their sons and their daughters. I ask that you accept my apology and hope that you forgive us as men for being irresponsible. And I pray that every single person have the opportunity to have some men in their life that care for them and do manly things instead of male things. On behalf of Dr. Faith and on behalf of Pastor Knox and our executive producer, Derek Richardson, our producer, Kevin Logan, and our director, Nicole Richardson, and my two guests for tonight, Chalet and Omar. Thank you guys for coming through. And once again, this is Male by Birth, Man by Choice. This is Coach Gustus signing off. And till next Friday, peace.